There's a voice inside you that you've mistaken for your own conscience, yet it doesn't truly belong to you. It's a voice that quietly commands, emerging when you gaze in the mirror and sense a mismatch, or when you accomplish something, but it still feels inadequate. It appears when you love without being able to fully commit, or when you're plagued by doubts of unknown origins. This voice, masquerading as your own, actually belongs to someone else, your father. This isn't literal, of course. It's not his voice as you hear it today, but rather the emotional imprint he left on you before you even recognized your own individuality. It's a reflection of his behaviors, his presence, or lack thereof, his way of loving, or his struggle to express love. It's his shadow, invisibly inked into your emotional makeup. It doesn't matter whether he was a hero, a tyrant, a ghost, or a blend of all these. The real issue isn't him. It's how you internalized his image as a child, what you believed you had to become to earn his love, respect, or attention. The unsettling truth is that you don't remember forming this image, or when you began molding yourself to fit it. Yet now, every time you compare yourself to others, demand perfection, or hold back your tears, you're following an unconscious pattern you didn't consciously choose. This video isn't about blaming or glorifying the paternal figure. It's about confronting the psychological maze that has been trailing behind you since your world was just a room, a deep voice, and a silence loaded with meaning. It's about the significance he held, the invisible standard you still use to gauge your worth, and the realization that this standard is flawed. You're unaware of how much of your actions are driven by the fear of disappointing a man who might not even be present anymore, or who perhaps never truly was. You don't know how many of your choices are subconscious efforts to be acknowledged by eyes that might never have learned how to truly see. You might not realize how much of your self-demand stems from a youthful desire to be sufficient for a figure you either idealized or feared. What if I told you that the father who influences your life is not the real one, but an imaginary version? What if the ties that bind you are not factual, but are instead emotional wounds inflicted in his name? What if the archetype you carry within, that silent judge, that standard of what you should be, has been your greatest barrier to emotional growth? Many people go through life trying to satisfy an internal father figure who is never appeased. Others run from his shadow, only to find themselves resembling him more and more. This video serves as an emotional autopsy, aiming to excavate the figure of the father, not to demolish it, but to comprehend its true impact. As long as you blame him, you remain stuck, but as long as you idolize him, you're just as trapped. The only real way forward is to navigate through the pain, the myths, the unconscious loyalties, and start taking responsibility for the internal damage. This journey isn't easy. It's a descent to the very root, seeing the father not just as a person, but as a symbol. When you were a child, he was your entire world. Now, as an adult, his influence still looms large over your relationships, your self-esteem, your fears, your decisions, and how you love or flee from commitment. Have you ever wondered why you sabotage yourself just when you're about to achieve something significant? Or why you choose partners who are emotionally unavailable, as if maintaining distance is necessary? Or why you feel guilty setting boundaries, as if you must always justify your existence? The answer lies not in the present, but in your past, in the child who felt responsible for the pain at home, who thought that by trying harder, he could make his father smile, stay, stop yelling, or offer a hug. Decades later, that child is still influencing your life from the emotional shadows where you've confined him. The father complex is not just a theory. It's a prison you inhabit unknowingly. Yet here lies the greatest mystery. You are not doomed to repeat these patterns. You are not chained to this figure. You can break free, but only by turning your gaze inward, by challenging the emotional deity you've constructed in your mind. Healing begins not by forgiving your father, but by forgiving yourself for losing touch with your essence in your efforts to align with an external image. This video is a key, an opening in the barrier, but stepping through it is far from comfortable. It requires bravery. It demands that you stop seeking blame, stop waiting for recognition, and stop pursuing approval that will never arrive as you hope. True emotional freedom starts when you cease demanding your father to be the one you needed, and instead become the adult that your inner child has been waiting for. Are you ready to confront that shadow? Are you prepared to realize that the pain you bear is not your own, but it is your responsibility to address it? Then step forward. This isn't just a video. It's a mirror you've avoided all your life. And as we proceed, remember, once you recognize the shadow of the Father within you, merely seeing it isn't enough. You must confront the more troubling emotional legacy you carry. You didn't merely inherit physical traits, ideas, or mannerisms. You inherited his silences, his emotional repression, his approach to conflict, and the shame he never dared to name. Now, without realizing it, you repeat these patterns, not out of desire, but because they're woven into your being. The figure of the Father is more than an archetype. It's a conduit for emotional transmission. It's how generations of fear masked as strength, control disguised as protection, and absence portrayed as authority continue. Unbeknownst to you, you've been the carrier of all this. You are not just the offspring of a man. You are the progeny of his narrative, his traumas, his ancestors, his unresolved issues. If left unaddressed, this cycle persists within you, projected onto your children, your partners, your decisions. You are the reverberation of his unresolved issues. Yet, there's a subtler, more insidious aspect: identification. That sense that deviating too far from his ways is a betrayal. That quiet guilt when you think, act, or desire differently, when you yearn to break free from the pattern. That deep-seated impulse to follow in his footsteps, even when you know they lead to destruction, because deep down it feels like loyalty, as if the only way to show fidelity is to continue bearing his pain. And here arises the fiercest conflict, the conflict of identity. When you begin to heal, to question, to emotionally detach from that figure, something within you protests that you are being disloyal. But this isn't betrayal, it's evolution. And evolution is painful, for it symbolically involves killing the father within, not the man, but the archetype, the model, the voice that critiques every time you diverge from its dictates. Killing the father isn't an act of violence. It's an act of liberation. It's about ceasing to seek permission to exist. But be cautious. Just when you believe you've escaped his influence, it manifests anew, disguised in your unattainable standards, your need to prove your worth, your harsh self-judgment. Where do you think this internal judge originates? It wasn't born with you. You cultivated it with every disapproving glance, real or imagined, from him. You nourished it every time you longed for an "I'm proud of you" that never came. And now, that judge resides within you. And the most perilous aspect? You believe in it. And what makes it even more dangerous is that often, this internal father isn't shaped by the real person you knew, but by what you thought you needed to be for him. In other words, you live in response to a narrative you authored as a child to emotionally survive, a narrative where you were never enough, and he was the unattainable ideal. And this haunts you in your work, your relationships, your self-perception. So we arrive at a harsh yet liberating truth. If you continue seeking your father's validation, even if he's no longer alive, you will never be free. Because you're not really seeking his approval. You're trying to heal a wound that won't mend with applause. This wound heals only by looking inward, by embracing that broken child, by holding him yourself, by reassuring him that he no longer needs to earn anything, that he doesn't have to be perfect, that he's no longer alone. And this is where many falter, because it demands emotional maturity, not in the superficial sense of being independent, but in the profound sense of becoming your own paternal figure, learning to provide the support you hope to receive, learning to say, "I'm with you," even when you falter, learning not to demand the impossible just to feel worthy, becoming your own support system. That is growth. That is healing. But there's one more thing you should know. The pain doesn't completely vanish. It shifts. It stops being an empty void that drags you down and transforms into a space where you can fail without self-destruction, where you can allow yourself to be human. And that is what the archetypal father never taught you. But now, you can learn it. Maybe he didn't know how to bear your pain, but you can bear your own. Maybe he didn't know how to communicate, but you can learn to express yourself. Maybe he never truly saw you, but you can learn to see yourself. And there, in that act of radical self-compassion, a new narrative begins. One not scripted with the scars of the past, but with the awareness of the present. A narrative where you don't need to resemble anyone else. You just need to be more authentically you. And gradually, almost imperceptibly, you stop feeling at war with your father, with your past, with yourself. Not because everything is healed, but because you've shifted perspective. And from this new vantage point, you can truly start living. Without repeating old patterns, without fleeing, without owing anything to anyone, especially not to him. And now that we've reached this juncture, before we proceed, I want to introduce you to our book, The Formula of Awakening, now available. If you sense something within you yearning to awaken, but aren't sure where to begin, I invite you to transform your thinking and, with it, your life. Discover who you can become. Start today. The link to purchase the ebook is in the first pinned comment of this video. Take advantage of this great offer now. With that said, let's continue. Now that you've come this far, take a moment to reflect. Perhaps you haven't realized it, but you've already changed. You've crossed the threshold of self-deception. You've confronted what you were reluctant to see. You've listened to what you've long silenced. And though you might now feel a tightness in your chest, this isn't a sign of weakness. It's an indication that something within you is awakening. Because what you feared most wasn't your father, his judgment, or even his absence. What you feared most was the realization that you no longer need that figure to define you, that you can stand on your own, that the script is now in your hands. And while empowering, this realization is also daunting. Because if you're no longer just a son of his shadow, what are you? And here's the most exhilarating part, a secret that no one tells you. One that only becomes clear when you're ready. When you stop searching for the Father externally, he begins to emerge internally, not as a remnant of the past, but as a new force, a quiet strength that doesn't impose, demand, or inflict pain, a presence that supports you without overwhelming you, a guide that doesn't judge, compete, or condition your worth. This inner father bears no resemblance to the one you inherited, because he's not composed of expectations, fear, or emptiness. He's made of you, your clarity, your kindness, your transformed anger, your ability to choose freely. And when you start living from this place, everything changes. Your relationships evolve. Your decisions carry a different weight. Your energy no longer orbits around the past, but paves new pathways. You're no longer a repetition. You're a creation. But this journey doesn't end here. Now comes the most challenging part. Now you must practice. You must apply this understanding when someone rejects you, when the old wound resurfaces, when the internal critic speaks up. This is where you'll discover if you've truly begun to be your own emotional anchor. I won't sugarcoat it. You will stumble. You will doubt. You will be tempted to revert. But every time you choose to respond from awareness rather than from the wound, you'll have won a silent battle, one that only you will know you fought. And that is the most courageous act you will ever undertake. Most people don't reach this point. Most prefer to continue blaming, idealizing, or escaping. But you are here, and that signifies something within you no longer desires to live unconsciously, no longer wishes to repeat patterns, no longer wants to adhere to an emotional legacy you never chose. So here, this journey concludes, but only as a video. What follows is your real life, your narrative, penned by different hands. Yours. Your emotional liberation doesn't hinge on past events, but on what you choose to do with them now. And if any of this resonated with you, if it touched a wound you didn't realize was still open. Leave a comment with the phrase, "I choose my story," because choosing your story is the beginning of writing what no one taught you to imagine. And if you feel this video reached something profound within you, subscribe. This channel isn't here to entertain you. It's here to challenge you, so you never view yourself the same way again. And so, you know you're not alone in this process. Because here, we are many reconstructing ourselves. Now, turn off the screen. Embrace the silence. Listen to what your body communicates. And do something no one did for you. Embrace yourself as if you were the most significant person in the world. Because you are. See you in the next video or in your next version. Farewell. And never forget this. The shadow dissolves when you walk with the fire ignited from within.